Welcome back to Panel A Superheroes Ahoy. My name is Sushar. So today we are back with another book from my shelf. I'm trying to revisit these books, which I don't even remember what did I feel when I read them many years ago, many as in 5 to 6 years ago. And I'm just pulling out these kind of more abstract, like offbeat kind of books. I call them out of left field. So there's a similar book that was on my mind for some time. It's Omega the Unknown by Jonathan Lethem with Karl Rusnak. It's illustrated by Farel, Dalrymple, and colors by I can't pronounce this. So to start a bit about the book, this was a Marvel character, Omega the Unknown, that had a limited run. So this was a book by Steve Gerber, and it did not continue. And there's a lot of stories about how he was fired from Marvel, and then how when Lethem was writing this book. Because he calls it his most favorite comic book ever, and so when he was in the entire Marvel's iconography and asked to pick up a character, pick up something that he would love to write, that's what he jumped at, Omega the Unknown. So Jonathan Lethem, if you know about him, he is a very prolific writer. He falls in pretty much the same genre as Michael Chabon. So they have often written about superheroes. So like Michael Chabon is someone with whom, uh, with whose works I'm more versed with. So Cavalier and Clay, and then within that, Chabon writes about a hero called the Escapist. So I've had read like few books of him. Lethem, I had read the book Chronic City, which dealt with some of science fiction, and Lethem often interconnects like the elements of science fiction with a very Americana, I might call it, and it'll deal with issues of very New York, and then he just goes deep within the mannerisms and the street speak of the neighborhood and so on. So this is where it talks about the book's theme as such. So it's a little complex, but the central character is of a guy called Alex, or Titus Alexander Island. He's a kid who's struggling to overcome the death of his parents. He's thrust into an otherwise mundane world, slowly crumbling under the weight of frenetic robots, crazed superheroes, and giant marauding body parts. The exact nature of weirdness and identity of the Cape hero shadowing the boy, watching him and monitoring his safety is entirely unknown. So I'll not go deeper into that, but this is pretty much the premise. And like I said, it talks about that Steve Gerber and Mary Screen's 70s era cult classic is being revisited here by Lethem and Rusnak, and it keeps all the oddball hippiness of the original and expands on delightfully impressionistic new textures. So I would say it was quite a tough read for me, but the art sort of helps and I'm not sure exactly, but I felt that the panels or the art goes from simple to complex. So initially there is a few things like typical superhero sequences shown where it establishes the premise of there being this weirdness around, like there are parts that have like robots inside of them, and then there is a uh, anyone who is like familiar with the comic books universes, they would pretty much identify with that, like there is these robotic elements, and there is some monster elements involved, and some existence which is out of the ordinary, and then there is a boy who is who is undergoing certain treatments at a facility, and Lethem paints all these sceneries really well. And the book has 10 chapters, and each chapter they are just having a ball with the kind of uh, art styles that are, it's very street graffiti. It might remind you of some more artists. To me, it took me to Matt Kind and Jeff Lemire at times, but it's its own kind of style and universe that they create here. So then there is the concept of a supervillain. So essentially the book deals with, there is a uh, kind of an obscure or left to the relics kind of superhero, Omega the Unknown. Then there is a very popular superhero called Mink. And then there is this is pretty much like your archetype of a superhero. And then there is the character of Alex. So this is the basic like character graph of the book. And then what the team does is deals with different kind of themes. So uh, the themes being uh, subverting the superhero genre, which pretty much the original comic meant to do, but it came in the 70s, so it came a good 10 years before Watchmen. So there is an extended write-up given at the back where Lethem and Rusnak talk about their influences and what was their going into these projects. So I should also mention that for me, like when I have heard of writers and I have started reading them in the past, like Jonathan Lethem or Michael Chabon, comics are if they have worked into the superhero genre, it's a good jumping on point for me, because it's like an easier route for me. So I've read China Miéville's Dial H. He wrote that book for DC in the entire new 52 kind of run that happened. And because I had read a book of his, uh, I think it was a science fiction book. And so yeah, and similarly for authors like Ta-Nehisi Coates, whom I find a little tough to approach, or even Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman is obviously not in the same breath. His work is very prolific. It expands or transcends sort of formats. But the point I'm making is, when writers who are influenced by comic books as they are growing up, and they imbibe that kind of a comic book aesthetic, and when they go out to write a comic book project, it becomes a very interesting thing for the conventional comic book reader to approach. And also it's quite challenging, but that's what the comic book medium is. You challenge yourself, you approach a book, and it teaches you so many things that you normally wouldn't have learned. So, like I said, the small town neighborhood aesthetic is brought along well. There is a constant flow of dark humor. It becomes more pronounced towards the later parts. There is typical elements like campus bullying that happens, and there is the objects that you would associate that kind of an American neighborhood with, like food trucks, or like vandalism of statues and burger joints. And there is these sometimes there are these trench coat characters also seen, like a little bit of detective stuff also happening. This character does homeschooling, so there is often also a kind of an interesting commentary on homeschooling, and how there is this thing about prodigy complex, and it's not always true. Another interesting thing is, in before every chapter this robot is shown, and it's gradually builds up, so it's like almost being building up to a robocalypse kind of a thing. So like I said, it deals with commoditization of superheroes through the central character called Meg. There is often like in jokes on the entire superhero thing. If you have read or researched about this is another chapter, wonderful kind of the establishment of the Omega the Unknown's character through the artists and the team. So like I was talking about the concept of circularity, like who watches the watchman. So that also is invoked here, and then there is a lot of weird asides here, and I think that pretty much happens in the weird science fiction realm. Like there is some panels that go without caption, and it's like a finger. So a man is cutting a finger and putting it in a burger, and then that portion leads to this robotic nanoparticles entering the human body. And there is one sequence on a book of robotics. It gets stuck in a professor's chest literally, and then then there's different sequences that happen. So this is pretty much like I would kind of maybe draw a parallel to watching an indie film which has its own universe, its own kind of aesthetic. Sometimes you might not follow the kind of language the characters speak, the kind of phrases they use, their mannerisms, but you go along with that, and you start appreciating their universes. So definitely not a very easy read for me, but I like to challenge myself, because at some time you do want to get into something more complex. So this is kind of a milieu that it works in. So these books or Lethem is deeply entwined in that kind of milieu of schools, of small towns. And here is again like a tribute to Omega the Unknown, and there are the characters are reading the book, so obviously there's a lot of meta stuff that is happening here. So and there is this villain who is literally a statue come to life, and I found it really funny. I think it's pretty much like the Watchers. Uh, there's kind of the so this is again another innovative thing that happens. So this is like a villain called Overthinker, and there is his kind of a origin story, how he came to be, and it goes completely in kind of a forced verse. So it's like the team is having a ball pretty much here. So you see a band here called the Overthinkers, and he says that maybe I should post a classified in Mink's Labyrinth called Vocalist Seeks Band. So a lot of that kind of humor, a lot of pop culture references, obviously, that you would see in a Chabon or a Lethem kind of project. So this is Omega the Unknown pretty much. And chapter 9 happens, and the book towards the end, it goes completely without caption. So chapter 10 is pretty much just pictures, just images, and just a few words at the back. So yeah, I've given you a flip through of Omega the Unknown. I'll just show you this very cool section where there are panels from the original book, and they are juxtaposed against what Lethem and Rusnak found impressive. So they call it like Hell's Kitchen. They speak about it like a nerd in Hell's Kitchen kind of a setting, and then how do they take those characters further ahead and what they like. So when someone does a kind of a passion project like this, it really becomes very exciting. You are both reading a book or a superhero, if you will, project, and you are also appreciating the writer's take on it, and it becomes quite geeky. And they have talked about Philip K. Dick elements in it. So there's a lot of Philip K. Dick elements that one might identify. There is Lethem talks about Omega's soliloquies that he has tried to also homage in this. So this is Omega the Unknown's original cover, and then there is some art provided here, and as you can see, the art is just again excellent here. And that pretty much wraps it up for Omega the Unknown. Again, a book that every time I think it's kind of a book that you would revisit like once in a year, and you would get kind of a unique perspective every time. So yeah, that was my talk on Omega the Unknown by Jonatham Lethem with Karl Rusnak, and definitely check it out if you are into like I said, out of left field books, and certainly projects that come from a mainstream publisher, but they have something more than meets the eye. So that's about it. Omega the Unknown, highly recommended from me, and thank you for watching Panel Days, and see you in next video.